It's only in recent years that we are starting to have more investors and other corporate stakeholders pay more attention to ESG and focus on what it can do. Even enterprises decided to suddenly put a spotlight on their environmental, social, and governance data. This meant that suddenly people were focusing on labor policies, diversity, carbon footprints, emphasis on sustainability, and more. So, what is the impact of ESG going to be? Regulation may be looked at more closely through an ESG lens. There will be much more focus on corporations, banks, insurers, and more when it comes to regulation and guidance. The carrot approach has been used for ESG issues, and it looks like policymakers will go for the stick option. The organizations that went to embed ESG principles into the operational framework want to augment the reputation and reap the benefits. But on a larger scale, there may still be some reluctance for ESG principles. While regulators are all set to mete out fines for failing to comply with ESG regulations or concealing disclosures that are supposed to be mandatory, a new role will definitely gain prominence. And what is that? It is of the Chief Sustainability Officer. Now, these individuals would be appointed to be part of the C-suite. Sure, there is a worry as to whether these appointments would be purely ceremonial, but as long as CSOs make sure ESG is incorporated within the business, it will actually be so worth it. It also means that there would be much more executive accountability given the Herculean task of companies trying to be ESG compliant when stakeholder capitalism has been absent for so long in many enterprises. Supply chain decision making will also have ESG considerations. It's not just business operations that must tangle with ESG principles. Distribution networks and supply chain must also align with sustainability to mitigate ESG risks. In 2022, third-party ESG risk management propositions have begun to ramp up. This is to analyze the procurement process and supply chain operations. This is to ascertain whether there are any areas of concern concerning ESG risks and to make sure that the company is safeguarded from these risks. This also helps companies become anti-fragile in case of other black swan events in the future. The COVID-19 pandemic was one such event that was detrimental to supply chains. So making supply chains more resilient is definitely something enterprises aspire to. Supply chains are already so complex and improving them is difficult and expensive, so many companies are turning to third-party consulting services. Climate resilience will increase in popularity when it comes to meeting net zero targets. Of course, getting to a low carbon economy won't be easy, but corporations are going to try to establish themselves as climate leaders and capitalize on any economic opportunity that they present themselves. There is pressure by stakeholders on companies to meet net zero targets, and one potential solution is carbon offsetting. Now, what does that really mean? Basically, CO2 emissions can be balanced by measures that would reduce carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Measures like reforestation, afforestation, energy efficient technology investments, and more. Now, that being said, this may just be a short-term solution and drastic measures need to be taken to actually reduce CO2 emissions, not just negate it with some other practices. India's Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi has outlined a goal of India being energy independent by 2047. Let's see how corporations take part to meet that goal. Of course, what could exactly go down cannot be accurately predicted, but one thing's for sure, ESG principles and compliance are here to stay, and it's up to corporations and companies to decide whether they want to dip their toe in or just jump into a pool of sustainability and success.